For this screencast, we are going to look at quizzes and tests during remote learning and possibly when we are not in remote learning. So I am in the World War I tab, and for the most part, at the end of every unit tab is where you will find your quiz study guides and your test review samples. So I'm going to look at this first one, your quiz review guide. And so let's see. So this looks like the multiple choice section here where you'll have to know UGSW, which is Unrestricted German Submarine Warfare. And then this would be like a multiple choice bank where you would see A, B, C, D, E, and then you just kind of have to match them up. This part is kind of tricky. Like Serbian nationalists, that could be a reference to Princip. That could be a reference to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, imperialism, the assassination of Ferdinand. So it could mean multiple things. Whereas for the blank check, if you remember, that is the document that Germany sends to Austria after the assassination of Ferdinand. I use images, whether I write them on the board, draw them on the board, or use them in PowerPoints. And I sometimes include those on assessments. So like here, you see an image of something that is addressed in a screencast regarding the U.S. entry into World War I. And here you see just 6 and 7 where it's asking you to look at definitions. So you probably want to know Lusitania as well as UGSW, Unrestricted German Submarine Warfare. This is a question style that I use throughout the year, and it's about putting events in chronological order. The question is asking you to pick the options that correctly place the events in chronological order. So we have 1, 2, all the way up to 6 events. A choice that you probably will see as an option could be choice A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Choice B could be 2, 1, 3, 5, 4, 6. And really what you're picking in that order is you're placing these items in their correct chronological order. And so that's kind of what's going on with this one. So to try to give you an idea of how that would work, okay, so let's see. We have the Berlin Conference of 1884. Well, that sounds like it has to happen pretty early because it's definitely before the assassination of future leaders. So I would probably say that. Wait a minute, we have 1800 European imperialism. Okay, well, that's 1800, so that definitely has to be early. So I would probably say that that is going to be before 3. So I know that in any of my choices, I'm probably looking for 1 to be the first item. So 1800 European imperialism would be the first thing that happens amongst the 6 here. So what has to happen next from this point? Okay, well, let's see. Look at 4 and 6. The 1871 creation of Germany, and then 6, Germany becomes a European rival competition, European rival slash competition. So that tells me that number 4 has to be before 6 because Germany has to be created before it can become a European rival. Okay, so we also have yet another date here, which is 1884. So I know that 1871 has to be, number 4 has to be before that. So I'm going to say 1 is the first thing that happens, 1800 European imperialism. Then we have the creation of Germany. Then 3, the Berlin Conference of 1884 is the third thing to happen. And now I'm just left with 2, 5, 6. Now, before you have an arms race and secret treaties start, you probably want to have tension amongst the European rivals. So that tells us that between 2 and 6, this is the next possible thing that happens. Germany becomes a European rival slash competition, which then forces an arms race and secret treaties begin. 5, and then the last thing that happened is the assassination of the future leader that triggers the treaties that are mentioned here. So the correct answer for this question would be 143652, and that would be placing all of these events in the correct chronological order. Tough question, but that's looking at your understanding of events and making sure you have the correct chronological order. Now, I probably will use 1 to 2 on a test for these. If we were in class, I don't know how many of these I will use. Probably 2 for the first entire unit on World War I. This right here is another matching section. So it's looking to see whether or not you know if you can identify, the main point behind these primary source documents. And if you're wondering, well, where do we get those primary source documents? We did an entire class looking at those documents. So here they are. I even created a screencast right here explaining, the documents and trying to decode them for you. Let's move on. Here we have a map. I'm not sure what the map is asking. All I'm saying is you probably want to be able to understand the map or be able to read a map. So this has to deal with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And all I will say is I am probably going to ask you about Bosnia, Herzegovina, Sarajevo, and Serbia, because this is where the terrorist organization seems to have some primary concern with. Notice the image here, which is a reference to the card game. We have some political cartoons and a drawing by a student. So could be some analysis of those items, like, let's see, which one is about trenches? I would say out of these three, the closest one to trenches is probably this one, because this is about Germany submarine warfare. This is about European rival. So Zimmerman note is probably closer related to this one, but I don't necessarily think that's what the question's asking you. It's asking you this one to look at the Zimmerman note. If you are in the academic class, it's just, academic presentations. Do you know what trench warfare is, World War I weapons, chemical warfare, and a reference to the books that are here. Now, I do have some other files regarding assessments here. Let's take a look at this breakdown. If we were in class, I usually make it a point to give each class a breakdown of the questions. So this was a breakdown from a couple of years ago, and usually I change this and then I'll let the current class know what they're in for. So we have the first 20 questions are from the presentations, and then these questions are about causes, and then so on, so on, so on. Notice how I'm testing on yearly themes, political cartoons. There's always a document section. And then what we did in class, notice there's 81 to 100. These are simulation type questions. So think about the card game that we played. I always upload a sample honors test and a sample test with answers. So when we open up this one, it's an actual test that you can print out and use to study, and you see some of the documents. You get a sense of the style of questions, how I ask questions, and so on. To further help students, I also have this file which has red writing, and I just tried to give you my explanation as far as why some of these are correct. I do want to point out that there may be one or two items that maybe I have changed, and so if there's any issue of clarification, maybe I made a mistake. Let's take 38. Let's say, I don't know, there's an error on my part, and I said that this was D here, and then you went with D, but it was changed differently on the test. Keep in mind, that is going to happen. But for the most part, I went through this stuff. It shouldn't be too, confusing. If there is any issue, feel free to email me. This is an actual standard test from one of my honors classes from years ago. I do use similar questions. Maybe I word a question differently. Maybe I take things out. So you definitely want to make sure that you are looking at these. Do this one on your own and then check your answers. This file just says World War I academic, and it just seems to be, sample tests from years prior. So that's what's going on here. And that's it. For remote tests, what I am doing is simply taking for the quiz and the test questions that appear from these items and putting them into online assessments. So I definitely would say to take a look at these quiz review guides. And if there's anything that's very specific during remote learning, I will then let you know. But for the most part, you should be looking at these guides. The questions will not change too much. Hope this helps.